Long before the Third Age, the original Dark Lord of Middle-earth operated as a literal, physical god. His name was Morgoth. He stood as a towering, armor-clad titan, possessing a physical might that dwarfed anything the world would see in the centuries to follow. During the First Age, the High King of the Elves, Fingolfin, rode alone to the Black Gates of Angband. Overcome with despair over the ruin of his people, he challenged Morgoth to single combat. To answer that challenge, Morgoth carried the original Grond, the mythic hammer of the underworld, a weapon of divine, world-breaking destruction. This topographical map shows the impact of that duel. Each missed strike from the hammer excavated the earth, leaving behind a field of fiery pits. Some were wide enough to swallow a whole company of soldiers, leaving the land scarred with deep, smoking chasms. Yet even a being capable of fracturing the earth could be broken. Morgoth was ultimately defeated by the host of the West and banished into the timeless void, leaving behind a massive power vacuum. His chief lieutenant, Sauron, eventually stepped into that void. Sauron, however, lacked the divine, world-altering physical strength of his master. To defeat the armies of men centuries later, he would have to replace mythological power with industrial engineering. By the end of the Third Age, Sauron faced an immense physical obstacle, the Great Gate of Minas Tirith. Built by the men of Gondor out of dark stone and iron, it was an architectural marvel completely impervious to standard siege weapons. To break it, Sauron commissioned the construction of a bespoke siege engine, naming it explicitly in homage to his former master's ancient hammer. This blueprint-style schematic compares the size of the Great Gate to the sheer mass of the new Grond. It was forged entirely from black steel, stretching over 100 feet in length, and capped with a hideous head resembling a ravening wolf. Producing a weapon of this scale required an agonizingly slow production cycle. It spent years trapped inside the hellish blast furnaces of Barad-dûr, deep within Mordor, before it was finally ready to deploy. By reviving the name and terror of the First Age, Sauron built a psychological monument. He designed this machine to inflict ancient mythological dread upon modern men. Delivering that dread to the front lines created a logistical nightmare. Sauron's armies had to transport thousands of tons of black steel across the ash, mud, and debris of the Pelennor fields. Pulling it required a highly specialized labor force. The Dark Lord deployed great rhinoceros-like siege beasts, aided by Olokai, a muscular breed of mountain troll engineered specifically to haul the massive iron chains. The immense weight and momentum of the machine made it impossible to steer carefully. As the heavy iron wheels rolled forward, they blindly crushed Sauron's orc infantry into the mud. To accompany this lumbering advance, Sauron initiated a coordinated auditory assault. Tens of thousands of orcs marched alongside the ram, rhythmically chanting its name, Grond. That chant served a very specific tactical purpose. It flooded the battlefield with noise, inducing panic and crippling the morale of the Gondorian defenders long before the iron actually touched the gate. Sauron engineered the physical transport of the weapon to double as a localized psychological attack. In a prolonged siege, absolute dread is just as crucial to victory as raw kinetic force. This vector force calculation illustrates the mathematical reality of the initial assault. Even at 100 feet long, the kinetic force generated by the ram hitting the structural threshold fails to exceed the gate's maximum load capacity. Physics alone could not breach the city. Knowing this, Sauron deployed his deadliest servant to supply the missing payload. The Witch King of Angmar stepped off his mount and approached the iron doors. He spoke words of power in a forgotten tongue. These spells of ruin seeped into the gate, actively degrading the structural integrity of both stone and steel. As the sorcery took hold, the weapon itself reacted. The massive iron wolf's head suddenly ignited, its jaws bursting from within with violent, ethereal flames. The execution of the breach followed an agonizingly slow rhythm. The great beasts heaved, and the blazing iron head struck the weakened gate exactly 3 times. The third stroke hit with the concussive power of a blasting spell. It sheared the unbreakable doors into riven fragments, blowing them inward, accompanied by a flash of searing lightning. Grond demonstrates Sauron's true tactical focus. He built a massive physical frame specifically to serve as a conduit for the Witch King's sorcery. By the time it reached the gate, the ram was less of a machine and more of a 100-foot delivery system for a curse that hit with the power of lightning.